When I was a child, it was regarded as something very special to climb the great mountains of Israel to watch the sunrise. I climbed every peak in the Galilee, obviously Mount Carmel, Mount Tabor, Mount Gilboa, Mount Zion, and it was, and still is, of course, a magical moment when the first rays light up the land from behind the Moab mountains. But the most exciting of these adventures was to trek for 3 days through the desert, as we had to do before the roads were built, and climb the winding track known as Snake Path. And from the top, from the ruins of the fortress Masada, we'd watch the sunrise over the Dead Sea. I must have walked up this path, 15, 20 times in my life. First as a young boy at school, and then in the youth movement, and then as a young man in the army. This is where I was sworn in as a soldier of the Israeli Defense Forces, right up here on top of Masada. Masada is one of the most important sites to Israelis and probably to Jews all around the world.
When you look out over hills bathed in sunlight that wrap themselves gently in skies washed with blue, when you look out over fields painted amber that seem to be there just for you, then in the silence you hear that the echo of thousands of years still remains, and you remember the moment in a time when their fortress, Masada, chose death over chains.
Masada will never fall again. This famous expression refers to a tragedy that befell this fortress nearly 2,000 years ago. It was the last retreat of a group of Jewish zealots who had rebelled against the Roman occupation of their land. These freedom fighters were besieged here for 3 years, a last pocket of resistance. The Roman armies were determined to crush them as a final lesson to all conquered nations. The Zealots had fled with their families to this fortress. It had been built by King Herod 1,500 feet above the Dead Sea Valley and thought of as impregnable. From the fortress walls, they looked down on the Roman legions camped in the baking desert, miles from the nearest water supply. In the fortress itself, there was no shortage of water at all. Vast cisterns cut out of the rock contained enough rainwater to last them for years. But the Romans finally overran Masada by an incredible feat of military engineering. They built a huge ramp from the valley floor using Jewish slave labor, knowing full well that the Zealots would never fire down upon their own people. And finally, when defeat was only moments away, the defenders, 960 men, women, and children, chose to commit mass suicide rather than surrender their freedom.
Now once again there is a peace The shadows of twilight are lengthening yet. All that remains are the feelings created in hearts that will never forget.
It's time to move on. And here comes my lift, right on time. You probably remember my daughter Anna. She was with us on our journey through the north. This time we were headed the other way, down through the desert along the line of the Great Rift Valley. And the images all around cast you right back to biblical times. But first I want to take you and Anat, of course, to a very special place which I first visited, it must be 35 years ago, when it took us a whole day to walk here from Masada. Now it's just a quarter of an hour's drive, but even so, try to imagine how it felt with the temperatures way up in the hundreds to finally arrive at En Gedi, the most beautiful oasis in the whole of Israel.
Where a cloud of white, an island in the heavens, shares her image like a mirror with the sea, where the reed sways and the palm tree beckons to the breeze that passes peacefully. The sun that rises greets the day at dawning, and by noontime is scorched and burned the ground. But En Gedi keeps the mist of the morning in shades of dappled green and brown. In the desert you flourish and grow. En Gedi, in the rays of the sunlight you glow. En Gedi, are your waterfalls laugh in the light, changing colors from morning till night, changing colors from morning till night.
Ah, cold.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, imagine now what it means to come in the middle of the summer and to find these fresh, cold water.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
it's beautiful.
Shall I tell you something? You're not going to believe it, but we used to jump from that rock up there down into the water. Of course, the pool was much deeper.
What, you used to jump from up there?
Well, when I say we, I don't mean I personally, but many of my friends did.
Ah.
I used to jump from there. That's high enough. We just happened to be the latest in a very, very long line of travelers who have discovered this paradise. It's just a valley, a crack in the side of a mountain. But it's an example of how water can transform a desert landscape.
What were you looking for?
En Gedi is where David hid from King Saul, who believed David was trying to steal his throne. A perfect hideout. But Saul tracked him down and camped in this valley with his army. If you know your Bible, you'll remember the story how David crept out and cut off a piece of Saul's robe while he was sleeping. He could, of course, have cut his throat if he'd really been an enemy. So it was a proof for the king, and the two became friends again.
If we are lucky, we may see some ibex. Can
Where?
you see it?
Oh, yes.
Right of the rock.
Oh, yes.
Two of them. Can you see two of them?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Ein Gedi, ein Gedi, in the desert you flourish and grow. Ein Gedi, in the rays of the sunlight you glow. Ein Gedi, are your waterfalls laugh in the light, changing colors from morning till night, changing colors from morning till night.
Engedi happens to be right on the shores of the Dead Sea, 1,300 feet below sea level, the lowest point anywhere on Earth.
I'll tell you, Anat, I'm not sure you understand exactly what it means, where we are. I mean, I once flew with Norman Jewison when he was looking for locations for his film, Jesus Christ Superstar. So we took an airplane and we flew around this area, and we flew over the Dead Sea. And suddenly we looked at the altimeter, and we both realized that we were flying, listen carefully, 1,100 feet below sea level, flying.
We don't call it the Dead Sea without reason. Nothing can live in these waters because they're 11 times more salty than any ocean. The water is thick and oily, and the minerals build into weird and wonderful shapes. Today, the Dead Sea, which I've taken for granted all my life, has suddenly been discovered by tourists from all over the world. The salt and the minerals, they say, are good for the skin, for your health, and you don't have to be a good swimmer either. It's really impossible to sink in these waters. I'm not kidding. We have over 300 kilometers to travel to reach Israel's southern border, the Red Sea. And that will be the end of our journey. To get there, we have to cut down through the Negev desert, and the further you go, the hotter it gets. But it's a fascinating journey, the landscape changing every few miles, and we'll constantly be reminded of the biblical links as we pass places like Sodom or, well, we've just actually passed Sodom. No, don't look back. It's hardly any wonder that people come here to film Bible stories in the settings where they actually happened. In fact, I've taken part in a few, and as an actor I can tell you that it really helps to be in the true location. You really can feel the atmosphere.
And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of.
You're watching a film of the Genesis Project. I've been working on it now for 10 years, trying to bring the story of the Bible to life.
And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice.
I really enjoyed playing the part of Abraham. You don't have too many parts like that in the world's repertoire. After all, if I may remind you, the script was written by the Almighty himself. Excavations have shown that in this particular area, people were mining copper long before the days of Abraham. Still, we call these rocks Solomon's Pillars, and we believe that this is where Solomon's original mines were. After the heat and the dust, after 300 kilometers of traveling through desert, the Red Sea rises like a mirage, a promise of relief and refreshment. Finally, here we are at Eilat, Israel's southernmost city. And I don't care if it is the middle of December. I've been longing for this moment. After the barrenness of the desert, it takes you really by surprise to find the Red Sea corals and reefs teeming with color and life. These warm waters attract scuba divers from around the world because of the infinite variety of marine life to be found here. To surface is in fact to plunge headlong into the 20th century with a vengeance. Eilat is an international resort in every sense of the word. Well, what can I tell you about Eilat that you can't see for yourselves? It's brash and it's hot, and I'd say that out of 365 days a year, the sun shines for 364 of them. And all I know is that whenever I try to contact my friends in Tel Aviv at the weekend, they're never there. That's because they're always here, if you see what I mean. They travel backwards and forwards 400 kilometers each way, and why? What for, I ask myself. Because of the sun, so they tell me. Well, they might have a point. Just across the Gulf there is the port of Aqaba in Jordan. You may have heard of it. It's where Lawrence of Arabia started pushing the Turks out of the Holy Land. These days, Aqaba is used from time to time by a rather famous royal water skier, King Hussein. And just in case you swim out too far from here, there is a patrol boat to turn you back. Now we are almost at the end of the road, and I mean that quite literally. This is our border post, but it's not exactly the border. Nothing is that simple here. So let me take you a little bit further to a place called Taba, where I always come when I really want to relax and get away from it all. Taba is paradise on earth. The funny thing is, nobody can agree who it really belongs to. Thousands of tourists come here each year from all over the world. And yet, if you were to send a postcard for this place, you wouldn't know what to call it. For the time being, it's considered to be no man's land. There's the border we've just come through. There's the hotel. Taba has one of the best hotels you'll find anywhere. And over there is the Egyptian border. Right now, there's a really heated controversy about this little patch of land. When Sinai was handed back to Egypt after Camp David, both sides claimed these few yards of beach. So the old maps came out, British-made maps in fact, and there was just a little discrepancy, a little lapse, if you like, in their accuracy. The line wobbles about just enough for Egypt to say the beach and the hotel should be theirs, and Israel replies, sorry, the maps say it's ours. Anyway, the row has been going on for a few years now, but the sun still shines and the tourists get their tans. Somehow, that seems to be much more important than politics here. Just behind the hotel is an amazing Polynesian-style village, the like of which could only exist in a place as unreal as this no man's land.
אני שואל ומתפלל, טוב שלא אבדה עוד התקווה. עובר מזמור מדור לדור, כמעיין מאז ועד עולם.
It's amazing. To this place flock Israeli government ministers, Egyptian customs men, Hollywood stars, pop singers, the glamorous and the international set, not to be on show, but rather to escape. Here they sprawl and bathe and eat with the fingers, and no one will care or comment or point them out. It's the friendliest, easiest place I know. And yes, my wife Galia and my daughter Adi have just flown in from Tel Aviv ahead of us, and they are here.
זה לאספנה יוצא, אתם תסתכלו
The village is named after the man who was crazy enough to build it in the middle of nowhere, a friend of mine, for many years, Rafi Nelson.
I tell you, John did shopping in what's the name of my husband? Carlos Saura.
Yeah.
This is a good friend. They come 10 years ago, and they used to take the bags of the hose and they put the hose.
To clean the
And Bert Lancaster used to take the plates, and I
Off
used
the
to
table to clean
of the
it.
tables. Nobody recognized him here, and a lot of us, included you, Chaim Topol. Yes, very simple, very easy. Everybody, על האורי. זה בתוך בפנים. אוקיי.
One of these days, and I hope it's very soon, the whole question of Taba and Nelson's village and the hotel will be solved. In the meantime, this is the place where I'm going to stop off for a while.
This is as far as we go. And you've seen my home. And as my friend Abu Nimr, a Bedouin, says, Wallah, a man, what is a man? A man is like a snail, he says. Always carries his home on his back. And so do I, wherever I go, and I go back and forth quite a lot. This is the home I always carry on my back. Here, we are at the southern tip of Israel, where in fact 4 borders meet. Over there is Saudi Arabia. Now, if we turn over there, this is the Jordanian border. There in front of us is Aqaba. This is Israel, of course. And over there is the Egyptian border. For the time being, this is the only border that is open for us, but I really hope that in the very near future, all borders around here will be open to everybody. And again, as my friend Abu Nimr says, borders, well, what are borders, he says. Borders are decided by people. And he says, I'm an old man now and I've seen them all coming and going. I've seen the Ottomans, I've seen the British, I've seen the Egyptians, the Israelis all come, go, fight among themselves. But I'll tell you one thing, he says, these mountains and this desert are here to stay forever.
All of these things will never change, and after all it's not so strange to still recall the trees, the paths that I remember. But I chance upon a stream, I stand and gaze as in a dream. The face I see, I realize, is one I do not recognize. But when I close my eyes, I see the way I know things used to be. The stars among the heavens and the sun upon the sea.
Topol's songs from this series can be found on a BBC album available now at record shops.